What do you get when you put a billionaire and NBA Executive of the Year and NFL Executive of the Year and 6 of the brightest NFL minds all in a Miami mansion? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. And from there, you'll get text messages from me. You'll get news, inside scoops, exclusive content analysis, and just conversation one-on-one with me, your host, David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, you know I greatly appreciate your continued support for the show. Again, to become a Locked Insider, go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders today. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. Use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's jacemedical.com. On today's episode, we're tracking the interview schedule for Washington Commanders managing partner Josh Harris as he looks for his new head of football operations and what hiring one means for general manager who, despite some reports, is still working for the team, Martin Mayhew, at the time of this recording. But first, the answer to my question from the opening is the future of the Washington Commanders franchise, at least most likely. The 6 candidates that the team is having down to their Miami headquarters, at least 5 of the 6 are confirmed to be headed down to Miami to interview for the open head of football operations job for the Washington Commanders. This list in alphabetical order. You've got Kansas City Chiefs assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi, Browns assistant general manager Chicago Bears assistant general manager Ian Cunningham, Eagles assistant general manager Alec Halaby, Cowboys vice president of player personnel Will McClay, and 49ers assistant general manager Adam Peters. So it's a lot of NFL executives from some fairly successful organizations, some fairly successful track records, each of them. But as we did with the coaching candidates, which if you haven't caught the coaching candidate episode, go one episode before this one and you'll find it. Highly recommend you go through there. We did a deep dive of 3 of these candidates. We're going to do a deep dive of 3 more candidates here for this executive position. And my number 1 candidate, actually, I'll just give you my top 3 and then we'll deep dive all of these. My number 1 candidate is San Francisco 49ers assistant general manager Adam Peters. Number 2 is Eagles assistant general manager Alec Halaby. Number 3 is Bears assistant general manager Ian Cunningham. So those are my top 3 candidates for the open head of football operations job for the Washington Commanders. Starting off with Adam Peters, the assistant general manager for the San Francisco 49ers. He's got 21 years in the National Football League as of this week, as of this season. 1 season in 2002 as a football operations grad student assistant, I believe is what it was called, at UCLA after he played defensive end for the UCLA Bruins. Then he joined the New England Patriots beginning in 2003, was there until 2008. He was a scouting assistant, became a pro scout in 2005, and then an area scout from 2006 to 2008. In 2009, he started with the Denver Broncos as a regional scout, moved his way up to national scout in 2011, and then in 2013, he became the assistant director of college scouting in 2014. So he worked as a national scout until 2013, became the assistant director of college scouting in 2014, was named the director of college scouting in 2016. After he spent those 8 seasons with the Denver Broncos, Peters moved on to the San Francisco 49ers in 2017, spent his first 4 years there as vice president of player personnel, and then he spent the last 3 as the assistant general manager to John Lynch, who is the general manager. And I think he also carries the title of team president, maybe, for the San Francisco 49ers. I know he has another position title. It's higher than that. And that's where some speculation came. There was some speculation that John Lynch might just move completely into whatever that other title is, and that Adam Peters would move into the full-time just general manager, get rid of the assistant tag and just become the general manager of the 49ers. Now, the fact that he's interviewing for other positions doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It just means that he's at least open to discussing with other teams what might be going on, open enough to fly from San Francisco, where they're getting ready for playoff game, not this weekend, but next weekend, to Miami. And that's a long flight. So imagine how interested or serious you'd have to be about a job to fly from San Francisco to Miami just to do an interview. We don't know who Peters himself has scouted. We don't know who any of these candidates have scouted specifically themselves or helped scout during their time before getting to the positions they're in. But while he was with the 49ers organization, not the 49ers organization, but while he was with all of these organizations, specifically starting with the Patriots, they drafted cornerback Asante Samuel, nose tackle Vince Wilfork, tight end Ben Watson, guard Logan Mankins, quarterback Matt Castle, kicker Steven Gostkowski. That he was drafted in the 4th round. I think that's important because we're going to see a trend here. And special team stud and team captain Matthew Slater. Then with the Broncos, obviously his roles are increasing, so he's more involved with the picks. They drafted wide receivers Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker, linebacker Von Miller, defensive tackle Derek Wolfe, defensive tackle Malik Jackson, offensive lineman Matt Paradis, defensive lineman Adam Gostis, safety Justin Simmons, and offensive guard Connor McGovern. Finally, with the San Francisco 49ers, obviously his most influential role to this date, not just in the draft, but in roster management. The Niners have since added tight end George Kittle, offensive lineman Mike McGlinchey, linebacker Fred Warner, defensive end Nick Bosa, wide receiver Deebo Samuel, punter Mitch Wishnowsky. He was a 4th-round draft pick. Linebacker Dre Greenlaw, tackle Justin Skule, wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, cornerback Diamador Lenore, safety Talanoa Hufanga, running back Elijah Mitchell, cornerback Tariq Castro Fields, who actually ended up playing for the Washington Commanders these last 2 seasons, quarterback Brock Purdy, and kicker Jake Moody, who was a 3rd-round draft pick. So obviously, there's a trend here with where Adam Peters goes. It's not just, the 49ers are willing to spend fairly early draft capital on punters, kickers. Everywhere he's gone, actually, that's kind of been the mantra is if we like a punter or kicker enough, we will spend. I mean, Jake Moody, a 3rd-round draft pick. That's almost. And if you've been in every day or for a while, you'll remember that we talked about Jake Moody as a potential day 3, like late day 3, like 6th or 7th round draft pick option for the Washington Commanders to bring some competition in for Joey Sly. So, obviously, I mean, I liked Jake Moody a lot, but obviously the 49ers liked him a lot more. And he's worked out, he's been a good kicker for them so far. Obviously, Peters is also part of the front office that sent the compensatory pick to the Washington Commanders in this year's draft in exchange for defensive end Chase Young. Chase is obviously now part of their team in the playoffs and honestly, he's on one of the teams that is favored to win the Super Bowl. So Chase Young may be getting himself a Super Bowl ring here this season. The best free agent signing in Adam Peters' current position since he's joined the San Francisco 49ers, I would say is fullback Kyle Juszczyk. He's been pretty valuable to that team. Defensive tackle Javon Hargrave could also be a candidate for that. The best trade that the 49ers have executed since Peters has been in his current role would be for running back Christian McCaffrey. The worst trade would be for quarterback Trey Lance. The Dolphins in that trade got the San Francisco 49ers 2021 first, 2022 first, 2023 first, 2022 third for the 49ers to move up to take Trey Lance. Trey Lance is now a part of the Dallas Cowboys. Meanwhile, the Dolphins turned all that draft capital, plus some. They used them in packages, but they end up getting Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, and linebacker Channing Tindall. So, a mixed bag there. Obviously, that's a swing and a miss. But some of the pros, when you look at Adam Peters, the history of being aggressive, and that's what that Trey Lance trade signifies. I didn't really like the Trey Lance trade at the time. I didn't really have the high evaluation on Trey that some people obviously did. But, there's at least some value to, we wanted a quarterback. We needed a quarterback. We loved this quarterback. So we went after it and we got him. That's at least something that organization can say they had. Not afraid to move on from a mistake as well, though. Once it was pretty evident that Trey Lance just wasn't going to be their guy, they went ahead. They executed a trade to get as much back from him. They traded him to the Dallas Cowboys, didn't get near what they spent to get him, but they got something, you know what I mean? Instead of just cutting him or letting him walk as a free agent. The organization is never known to be in cap trouble, which I think is incredibly important. And they're currently the number 1 seed. The San Francisco 49ers are in the NFC, yet they still have nearly $38 million in cap space, very money-wise there with the organization, yet building up talent. Came up in a true general manager, head coach partnership environment. And if you go back to the Josh Harris press conference, that's kind of what he's looking to do is he wants to separate, the coach and GM duties to draw a clear line between the two. And Adam Peters comes from that type of environment where you got somebody responsible for the roster building and the cap management and the trades and the draft, and you got somebody in charge of coaching, yet it is a partnership. Like John Lynch doesn't just draft his dudes and tell Kyle Shanahan, go make it work. No, he tries to get Kyle Shanahan the guys that he wants, but he takes care of that part in the evaluation process. And Adam Peters, 3-time Super Bowl champion. Who doesn't love that? Some cons, if there are any, more first-round misses than hits from the San Francisco 49ers, Denver Broncos, New England Patriots, specifically the 49ers. Quarterback instability before basically lucking into Brock Purdy. And even then, when they were going on their losing streak this season, there were a lot of people wondering if the 49ers would move on from him. So that is a little bit of a knock. He is my top choice, but he's not the only choice. We got 2 others in the top 3 coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but of course, we always have to get back to real life at some point in time. Right now, the FDA is saying that pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of one of the worst flu seasons in over a decade. I can actually attest to the fact that my family, there are 6 people that regularly stay in my house. 5 of them came down with the flu. I'm the only one that was able to escape it. I don't know how I was able to escape it, but I'm thankful that I was. So you definitely want to be able to have the meds on hand if you need them, when you need them. Thankfully, you can do that because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others, things that can really happen to any of us at any time. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com. Use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order at jacemedical.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros, sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and then watch the game in a way that you never have before. Fantasy football accentuates the NFL experience, but daily fantasy does it different, and PrizePicks does it a way that other daily fantasy sports platforms don't, including the offer to reboot your pick. So if you have a pick and a player gets injured for football or basketball games, if you have a player that exits the game in the first half, does not return for the second half, that player gets rebooted. Your entry is still active, but that player no longer counts against your entry. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform that has an insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL to get a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Continuing now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day. Every dayers. Come back tomorrow. We got a mailbag episode. You got questions about these candidates, some of the candidates that we didn't do a deep dive on. By all means, drop those questions in the YouTube comment section or text me directly. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an everydayer, or become an insider rather, not an everydayer. Hopefully you're already an everydayer. Become an insider, text me your question. We'll get a mailbag coming in. We've got our insider only mailbag command huddle on Saturdays coming as well. Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Our second candidate in our top 3 for the Washington Commanders head of football operations job is Philadelphia Eagles assistant general manager Alec Halaby. Halaby started as an intern in the Eagles football operations department in 2007. He was not with the team in 2008, but he was back in 2009, became a player personnel analyst in 2010, did that 2010 and 2011. Beginning in 2012, he was the special assistant to the general manager through 2015. In 2016, he became the team's vice president of football operations and strategy until he became the assistant general manager beginning in 2022 and then again in 2023. The entire time that he has been with the Philadelphia Eagles, his focus has been on player evaluation, roster management, resource allocation, with a specialization, pay attention to this, in traditional and analytical methods of decision making. We know that Josh Harris, that this new ownership group is big into analytics. They want to leverage analytics as much as they possibly can. That's why they brought in Eugene Shen. So the fact that Halaby has a background in making decisions using analytics, leveraging analytics, but also relying on some traditional methods and analysis as well, I think is very key here and very important. And that's actually why I give him the bump over our number 3 candidate. Although I will tell you, I don't have confirmation that our number 3 candidate doesn't use analytics or doesn't know how to use analytics, but the specificity and the clarity that is provided when you look into Halaby, that he is a guy that likes to use analytics. I think that's just, from our vantage point, from our foxhole, that's going to give him the bump here when we're talking about this conversation. So Alec Halaby obviously has been with the Philadelphia Eagles his entire time as a growing executive in the National Football League, and has been with the Eagles since he's been with the Eagles, this organization has drafted tight end Brent Selleck, wide receivers Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin, running back LaShawn McCoy, defensive end Brandon Graham, center Jason Kelsey, defensive tackle Fletcher Cox, quarterback Nick Foles, offensive tackle Lane Johnson, tight end Zach Ertz, defensive back Jordan Poyer, defensive tackle Bo Allen, quarterback Carson Wentz. I know, but he was good for the Eagles for a little bit there. Guard Isaac Siamalu, tight end Dallas Goedert, cornerback Avonte Maddox, defensive end Josh Sweat, tackle Jordan Mailata, tackle Andre Dillard, running back Miles Sanders, quarterback Jalen Hurts, defensive end Casey Toohill, who you know from the Commanders roster, wide receiver Devontae Smith, lineman Landon Dickerson, running back Kenneth Gainwell, offensive lineman Cam Jurgens, defensive lineman Jalen Carter, offensive lineman Tyler Steen, and defensive back Sidney Brown, who unfortunately suffered a torn ACL and is out for the season as the Eagles try to make their playoff run. So that's a lot of names. And again, it's just like with Peters. Don't know how much Halaby had a hand in each individual guy. You can bet that, he's an intern in football operations, so he probably didn't have a huge hand in guys like Brent Selleck, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin. But you do see a history here with the Philadelphia Eagles of going out and getting tight ends. Brent Selleck, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, all 3 of those guys Dallas is, the other 2 were very significant parts of the Eagles offenses throughout their tenure with the team. So obviously that's kind of something you would look for if he becomes, the guy in charge of the football operations in Washington is, who's that Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, Brent Selleck type tight end that he would then be looking for to build this roster around. Best free agent signing since he's been with the Eagles, Hassan Reddick, and that was most recent. And, Nick Foles certainly could be an option, but I don't think he really counts because he was drafted in Philly and then returned to Philly as a free agent. And also, I'm not sure how much Halaby had a role during that time, but Hassan Reddick is a more recent signing. Halaby certainly a movement maker, a decision maker in that process. The best trade, hands down, has to be for wide receiver A.J. Brown. The worst trade during his tenure, which, again, I'm not sure, this is a little bit earlier on, so I don't know how much of a role he really had, but LaShawn McCoy going to the Buffalo Bills. He ended up having 3 more Pro Bowl seasons for the Bills before his time was done, and that was easily the worst trade that they made. Pros, great draft history. Another team never known to be in cap problems. He's obviously been mentored by general manager Howie Roseman, the Eagles general manager, who's considered by many to be the best in the league. The control of roster environment is key in Philadelphia. There's a clear line between general manager, head coach, as far as who controls the roster. So that's another thing that Josh Harris is looking for again. And he's been a part of multiple builds and rebuilds to a Super Bowl contender. So he kind of sees what goes into making it happen and then remaking it happen, right? Cons, I guess, he's only worked for the one organization, so he could be a little bit narrow-minded, have that back in Philadelphia mentality coming with him since he's only had that one spot. Third candidate, Bears assistant general manager Ian Cunningham, who also has ties to the Philadelphia Eagles, and Howie Roseman. He spent 16 years in the NFL so far. Started off with the Ravens from 2008 to 2012 as a player personnel assistant, and then he was an area scout from 2013 to 2016. From there, he went to Philly as the director of college scouting. He was also the assistant director of player personnel and director of player personnel up until 2021. And then he was hired as the first ever assistant general manager in Bears history starting in 2022. The drafts that he's been on staff for have gotten players like quarterback Joe Flacco, running back Ray Rice, offensive lineman Michael Orr, wide receiver Torrey Smith, tight end Dallas Goedert, all those Eagles guys that we just talked about. Also some newer guys, Bears safety Jaquan Brisker, some rookies in 2023, which are, still in progress evaluations, but Darnell Wright, Tyreek Stevenson, Roshan Johnson, Noah Sewell, all guys that, again, if you were here with me during our draft preparation last year, those are all guys that I liked coming out in the NFL draft at that time. The best trade in his tenure with the Chicago Bears, trading the number 1 overall pick in 2023 to the Carolina Panthers for DJ Moore, 2 firsts and 2 seconds. I think that's hands down the best trade that they made since then. The worst trade is getting wide receiver Chase Claypool for a 2023 second round pick, which turned into Joey Porter Jr. for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Some pros, Cunningham comes from the Howie Roseman tree as well. The Howie Roseman tree has been pretty good to the NFL. 2-time Super Bowl champion, part of a staff that hasn't been overactive in replacing Justin Fields while making several moves to try and make the group around him better. So showing a little bit of patience, but also attacking the needs to make the quarterback better. He's had experience from multiple relationships, organizational environments, strong improvement from 2022 to 2023, even though they traded the number 1 overall pick. So the Bears trade from number 1 to number 9, but they still showed a lot of improvement this year, moving their way up from, I think, 3 wins last year to 7 wins this year. Justin Fields made improvement. Each of their units, offense and defense, I think they upgraded their rankings by 5 or 6 spots. So, not a huge leap like the Houston Texans saw, but still positive work happening in Chicago. Cons, not a very long track record as part of the decision-making process in Chicago to really evaluate. So those are our top 3. And I'm going to tell you that outside of Peters, at the top, there's some interchangeability between 2 or 3. I kind of already went over that. But what about the rest? And what about the rest of these candidates? And what does this search really indicate for the Washington Commanders? That's next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Around New Year's, we always get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what already makes us great. What are you already doing right? What do you want to build on? Therapy will help you find those strengths if you don't already know them yourself, so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes for yourself that will actually stick, that you'll see even further growth for before 2025. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime you need to for no additional charge. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Don't ditch your old self behind. Build on what you've already built in 2023 for 2024. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, the best of the rest of the Washington Commanders executive search. Again, Josh Harris, along with Bob Myers and along with Rick Spielman in his Miami mansion, in Harris's Miami mansion, interviewing people. Our top 3 of the 6 guys identified so far: 49ers assistant general manager Adam Peters, Eagles assistant general manager Alec Halaby, Bears assistant general manager Ian Cunningham. Peters interviewed Tuesday night. Halaby and Cunningham also both interviewed on Wednesday, or will interview rather on Wednesday. Chiefs assistant general manager Mike Borgonzi interviewed on Tuesday, as did Browns assistant general manager Glenn Cook. And then Cowboys vice president of player personnel Will McClay is scheduled to interview. I do not, at the time of this recording, have a firm date on when that will happen. So we've got our top 3, right? Niners assistant GM Peters, Adam Peters, Eagles assistant GM Alec Halaby, Bears assistant GM Ian Cunningham are our top 3. What about the other 3? Well, we got them in just that order. Chiefs assistant GM Mike Borgonzi is my 4th ranked guy on this list. I think Browns assistant GM Glenn Cook is number 5 for me. Cowboys VP of player personnel Will McClay is 6th. And again, kind of like the head coaching situation, really not a bad list. I think any of the top 4, so credit to Mike Borgonzi. Like, I know we're not going to do like a huge deep dive on him, but I think you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, you can say that the worst trade that has happened under his watch would be the Tyreek Hill trade. But at the same time, you look at a team that's never in cap trouble, and trying to give Tyreek Hill the payday that he was looking for, you're basically going to put yourself in that cap trouble, and you still got other, areas to look at. I think probably one of the most impressive things that you have to look at with the Kansas City Chiefs is the year they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I actually had a fairly suspect offensive line there, and they really attacked that and tried to make that better. Now, some moves have worked, some moves haven't worked, but again, you give credit to the organization for making the effort, making the intent to go out there and attack a problem on their team. And they've certainly been able to do that. And their defense, I think, you look at, everybody kind of knows who Chris Jones is, but a guy like L'Jarius Sneed maybe is not a household name around the league, but certainly has made impacts for them. I think their defense has quietly been one of the most improved units on their team over the last few years. So a consistent pattern of execs coming from organizations that have a clear GM and coach separation is really what stands out to me on this list. Now, with the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't know how much Andy Reid has a full hand in things versus the general manager, but you feel like that's probably the closest you get to kind of a mixed bag. But all these other ones, they preach teamwork, certainly. But there is a clear delineation. Obviously, with the Dallas Cowboys, there's an even clearer delineation between who makes the decisions for the roster and who coaches the roster. And that's exactly what Josh Harris is looking for. So the fact that all of these guys are coming from organizations that kind of have that history, not really a surprise. Now, it's important to remember and note, the Washington Commanders are looking to hire their head of football operations. That is not a general manager. Now, don't get me wrong, there could be some head of football operations out there that are also the general managers, and this one could certainly decide to do that. But Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney are still employed by the team as of the time of this recording. Now, I know it's been reported by some that they got fired, or at least Martin Mayhew got fired when Ron Rivera did, but they did not get fired at the same time. And again, if they got fired while I'm recording this, again, it's a separate move. But that's probably a change that's going to happen after the head of football operations is put into place. And same thing with the coaching staff. The head coach is probably going to make those decisions, or the head of football operations may come in and make some of those decisions. We'll have to see how they decide to do it. But the bottom line is, Josh Harris made it very clear that he's trying to do a thorough but rapid process to get his head of football operations in place. And that head of football operations, part of that interview process, again, maybe they're going to become the general manager as well, or maybe they're going to keep a general manager in Martin Mayhew or hire a new general manager. Could keep Martin Mayhew or Marty Herney, could keep them both. That's going to be up to them. It is important to know Adam Peters does have history with Martin Mayhew going back to their time together with the San Francisco 49ers. So a lot to keep an eye on, a lot to keep watch for. Today's usually our mailbag day, pushing the mailbag to Thursday. So that I can get this GM deep dive in for you. Again, the final candidates that we know of for interview dates are interviewing on Wednesday. So potentially as we speak right now, again, Cowboys VP of player personnel, Will McClay. I don't have a hard date for his interview to happen. So that could be happening Wednesday as well. It could be happening Thursday. Not sure, but we'll keep an eye out for that. Potentially any hires, if there's something to discuss on that tomorrow, we will, but we will also have our mailbag. Already got questions coming in about how this Josh Harris front office is going to work. You've got questions, so send them in. Again, drop them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to become a Lock Insider. Text me those questions and then keep a lookout for some of that bonus content. We've got film studies coming up. I'm starting my deep dive into Jahan Dotson, trying to pinpoint if and where things really went wrong with Jahan having that breakout season that we all kind of expected him to have here in year two. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Thanks for making me a part of your day, part of your routine. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind. I'll see you next time right back here for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.